Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. My name is Fazuni Ismail, student ID 7203140162200001, a psychology student year 2, semester 6 on subject ABPC1103, clinical psychology. Today I will present to you on the topic of community psychology. On this topic, I will discuss on number 1, introduction of community psychology. Number 2, on the ethicality and professionalism of community psychologists. Number 3, the reflect on my personal and professional values. And number 4, on how the approaches influence on my ethical decision making in community psychology. And indeed, at the end, I will conclude all. So without further ado, let's move on the first slide. What is community psychology? Basically, community psychology is a branch of psychology that focuses on understanding individuals within their social, cultural, economic, and environmental context that emphasizing community level influences on well-being. According to Rappert, 1977 stated that community psychology is based on the idea that social system and environmental influences are important for enhancing the well-being of each one of us. This area of psychology takes a public health approach where the focus in the person-environment fit instead of trying to change the person or the environment when a person is seen to have problem. I cited this from our clinical psychology module provided by OUM itself, written by Associate Professor Norma Chedin and Matilda Xavier. So let's delve further on the understanding on community psychology. What is the purpose community psychology? It is definitely to promote mental health and social justice by addressing system issues like poverty, inequality, and discrimination. Unlike traditional psychology, which often focuses on individual behavior, community psychology emphasizes collective well-being, empowerment, and prevention of psychological and social problems. Next, let's discuss on ethicality and professionalism of community psychology. There are many aspects on ethicality and professionalism of community psychology. So let's discuss about it. They are number 1, adherence to ethical standards. This means community psychologists must follow established ethical guidelines, such as those set by the American Psychological Association 2010, also known as APA 2010 or APA 2010, or equivalent bodies. These will ensure integrity and accountability in their work. Number 2, respect for diversity. A community psychologist works with diverse population, including marginalized and vulnerable groups. Ethical practice demands a deep respect for cultural differences and the need to avoid imposing dominant cultural norms. Number 3, commitment to social justice. This means ethical practice in community psychology emphasizes a commitment to reduce systematic inequalities and advocating for undeserved communities. Let's go on the next slide. Number 4, informed consent and confidentiality. Even when working in community settings, psychologists must ensure that participants understand the nature of the intervention or research, and also their privacy must be safeguarded. Number 5, avoidance of harm. A primary ethical concern is the do no harm principle. which applies to both individuals and communities. Community psychologists must be aware of the potential for unintended negative consequences of their intervention. Let's continue on the next slide. Alright, number 6 is collaborative approach. Ethical community psychologists engage in partnership with community members, valuing their input and fostering empowerment, which contrasts with a more top-down and paternalistic model. Last but not least is number 7, ongoing professional development. As the socio-political landscape changes, psychologists must remain current with new ethical standards, research methods, and community needs to maintain professionalism. Okay, next slide, I will give you an example of all the 7 approaches I had discussed. Alright, of all the 7 aspects that I had already discussed, I will summarize those in one very good example. So, can you imagine, just imagine this, yeah? A community psychologist working with a diverse, low-income neighborhood illustrates ethicality and professionalism by adhering strictly to ethical guidelines. These psychologists respect cultural diversity, valuing residents' unique perspective in all the interventions. She or he, dedicated to social justice, they address systemic inequities impacting the community's access to resources. They also ensure informed consent and confidentiality, also building trust and prioritizing residents' privacy. By focusing on strengths and fostering collaboration, they empower residents to become active partners in change efforts. Ongoing professional development keeps the psychologist informed of best practices, further reducing potential harms. These approaches foster a respectful, impactful relationship with the community, as you can see. That's for the example. Alright, on next slide, I will discuss on my personal and professional values and how they influence my approach to ethical decision making in community psychology. On the next slide, first, I will reflect on my personal and professional values. As I was saying earlier on, first I want to reflect on my personal values. Empathy, justice, and respect for others' dignity greatly influence how I perceive and approach ethical challenges in community psychology. These values guide my commitment to working with diverse communities and ensuring that interventions are respectful and also culturally sensitive. Now, it is my reflection on my professional values. Professional values like integrity, competence, and responsibility shape my approach to decision making. I strive to balance my responsibility to individuals with the broader goal of social change, ensuring that my actions align with ethical standards. Next, I want to share how these personal and professional values influence me on my ethical decision making in community psychology. Let's go on the next slide. As you can see on this slide, my personal and professional values help me to critically assess situations where ethical dilemmas arise. For example, I give you an example. When faced with a conflict between community interests and individual rights, I rely on principles of justice and respect to guide my decisions. I always prioritizing the well-being of the most vulnerable ones. Next, commitment to reflective practice also play a role to influence me on my ethical decision-making in community psychology. I continuously engage in self-reflection to ensure my personal biases do not interfere with ethical practice. This reflective approach helps me critically assess how my values align with the needs of the communities I serve. For example, I, as a community psychologist, work with a community immensely affected by socio-economic challenges. Through reflective practice, I would examine my own assumption or biases regarding poverty, race, or culture that could influence my understanding and treatment of the community. This could include asking myself a few questions like, am I assuming that these communities' needs align with my own experiences or cultural background? Or I can also ask myself, how might my personal values impact my interpretation of their struggles? So, I bet we have come to the end of this discussion. Allow me to humbly conclude our discussion. I conclude that community psychology as an ethical practice, when community psychology is deeply rooted in ethical principles, particularly those related to respect for diversity, social justice, and empowerment. Not even that, the integration of personal and professional values. The intersection of personal and professional values is crucial in making ethical decisions that benefit both individuals and communities. I also conclude the ongoing ethical vigilance as societal issues evolve. Community psychologists must remain committed to continuous reflection and professional development to maintain ethical standards and promote community well-being. Well, these are some of my references. Alhamdulillah, we have come to the end. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope this discussion will provide us some insight. I do appreciate your time. Take care and be safe.